Okay, so here are my thoughts on the ending of Assassin's Creed 3. So this video will obviously contain spoilers, so if you haven't finished the game and you don't want to be spoiled, I suggest you leave now. Okay, so anyway, on to my thoughts on the ending. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the two main endings in the game, which is the end of Connor's story and the end of Desmond's story. So first, let's have a look at Connor's story. So I was disappointed in the ending of Connor's story. At the beginning of Assassin's Creed 3, we start off playing as Haytham, and we get to really know his character, and we get to really like him. And then at the end of sequence 3, there's this huge twist in the story, and we learn a big piece of information, which is that Haytham is a Templar. And so all the way through the game, it feels like we're building up to this huge climax at the end of sequence 12, which is Connor versus his father. And as we play through the game, and as Connor grows and as he progresses through the main story, we start to realize and start to notice that Connor is having doubts, and he really is in a dilemma, and he's starting to doubt whether he can actually kill his own father. And even Achilles asks him outright, like, are you sure you can do it? Can you kill your father? And later, around sequence 9, sequence 10, Connor starts to interact with his father a lot more. And you can see at that point that he's already starting to doubt it. What I was expecting was that in sequence 11, we would finally face Charles Lee, who we really hated, and he's such a horrible character. And we would finally face Charles Lee. We would finally kill him, and Connor would finally have revenge for the death of his mother and the burning down of his village when he was a young boy. Connor would finally be free of this hatred and vengeance that he's been seeking all the way through the game. And then at the end of sequence 12, we would actually face off with Haytham. And, this would be a really exciting and really emotionally grueling conflict between Haytham and Connor. And that, Connor ultimately would have two choices to make. Obviously, the first choice would be that, Connor would try and talk to his father and persuade him, that the way of the Templars is wrong, and try to persuade him to give up his ambitions. And that, but that ultimately Connor would fail, and Haytham wouldn't, see the light, and that ultimately Connor would have no choice but to kill his own father in order to save, the American Revolution, and also to save the world. So that would be one choice that Connor would have. Or that actually Connor would end up, in a way, joining his father, and would actually end up siding with his father. And, really I thought this was what might happen, because at the end of sequence 10, the developers for the first time were doing something that was really, really interesting. And, all the way through the Assassin's Creed games, the conflict between the Assassins and the Templars has always been very, very black and white, which is the Assassins are good and the Templars are evil. But what was really fascinating in Assassin's Creed 3 was that Connor was starting to doubt whether this was actually the case. And for the first time, he was considering whether, the Assassins and the Templars could actually work together. And that, maybe he would make this decision at the end of sequence 12, and it would be the first case of, at some point in history where the conflict, the war between the Assassins and the Templars ended. And I was really excited about this whole direction that the story seemed to be going in. And I was really, really hoping that the developers would take it on and would develop it, and that it would culminate in something that was, really amazing and something that hadn't been done before. So that was what I was expecting, in sequence 11 and sequence 12. And it just didn't happen that way. And then in sequence 11, something happened that really surprised me. And basically in sequence 11, you know, everything was following the way I was expecting it to do. You know, Connor had infiltrated the fort, and you know, he was trying to track down Charles Lee to assassinate him. And then what happens is Connor gets injured. He gets injured, and he's in a really, really, really bad state. And you know, Connor is limping around and really struggling just to walk and stay on his feet. And you know, the whole way through, he's like, I can't face Charles Lee like this. I can't even face guards in this condition. You know, and I was expecting him to have to hide and then regroup and then try and take out Charles Lee later. But then Haytham turned up, which was a huge shocker to me. And then, you know, and I wasn't expecting that. And then suddenly it broke out into a fight. And the whole time, like during this fight, I was in complete disbelief because, you know, Connor was in a really, really difficult situation. And, you know, he's really injured. And Haytham is actually stronger than Charles Lee. He has the same assassin skills that Connor has. He's, you know, he's a lot tougher. He's a lot more hardened. He has a lot more experience. And the whole way through this, I was like, there is no way that Connor can fight Haytham and win. But the fight between Connor and Haytham just seemed really rushed, really boring, really repetitive. It just wasn't as epic as I was expecting it to be. You know, basically what you did is, you know, Haytham would go to hit you and you'd have to be near an object, and then, you know, he'd go to hit you and you'd press counter, and you know, you'd hit him, you know, throw him down onto that object, and basically you just had to do that, you know, and then he'd go to hit you again and you repeat the same thing again, and it was just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, until eventually you got a cutscene, and then, you know, in that cutscene, Haytham died. It just seemed really rushed and, you know, really boring and just very lazy on the developer's part, and I was really disappointed with it. I really liked Haytham. I didn't have an issue with Haytham dying. Like, fair enough. Like, if that was part of the story and Haytham, you know, had to die to, you know, to make the story, you know, emotionally powerful and effective, fair enough, absolutely. Like, if he has to die, he has to die. I had no problem with that. The issue I had with it was the way in which Haytham died. He didn't deserve such a rushed and lame and boring death. Haytham was a really cool character, and he deserved, you know, something that was going to be epic and longer, and, you know, an actual conflict and battle where both parties are at their, you know, their peak of their ability, and that it would be really long and drawn out, and it would involve lots of, like, you know, really, you know, exciting dialogue and you know, in a battle scene, and that it was just going to be really epic and something that, you know, he would deserve. And I just felt that the way in which he died was just really rushed and really lackluster, and it was really a shame for his character. So then Haytham died, and then obviously we began sequence 12, and then in sequence 12, you know, we're trying to track down Charles Lee, and, you know, we're trying to kill Charles Lee. But honestly, after Haytham died, when I began sequence 12, I lost the excitement I'd felt, and the build-up and the anticipation I had felt all the way through the game. I just lost it. And I started sequence 12, and I was just like, right, let's just get the game finished. Let's find Charles Lee, kill him as quickly as we can, done. And I was not as excited as I had been, as I have been in previous Assassin's Creed games. Like, always the final sequences has always been this big, you know, exciting, you know, climax to the story, and I just felt like it should have been Haytham, not Charles Lee. So yeah, so then in sequence 12, like, you know, we're trying to track down Charles Lee, and then the way in which sequence 12 was handled was just so frustrating and tedious. You know, rather than being this big, like, you know, battle and this big, like, climactic, you know, fight between you and Charles Lee, it ended up having lots of little, like annoying and frustrating objectives. Like you had to start sequence 12 and you had to do a chase scene where you had to chase down Charles Lee, and you know, you had to dodge around people and you couldn't push people, jump over barrels, you had to go through fire but you couldn't touch the fire. And then we had another part of the sequence which was, you know, by a boat, and you had to, like, you know, stealthily eavesdrop on some of the guards, and it was just really badly designed, sequence 12. I just found myself at that point just really frustrated, and I was just like, why are you doing this now? Why are you making me be stealthy right at the end of the game when I just want to find out what happens? And it was just really frustrating. And you know, right at the end of sequence 12, I hated sequence 12. It was the worst sequence in the entire game, in my opinion. And it shouldn't have been, because it was the end of the game. The final sequence should always be the best, the most exciting, you know. And it just really wasn't. And then we ended up chasing down Charles Lee, and then he stopped. Why did he do that? I have no idea. There's so many inconsistencies. And then anyway, and then Connor gets injured again, and then you know, Charles Lee escapes, and then Connor wakes up, and you know, he's walking, you know, going to try and find Charles Lee, and he's really injured, so he's really walking so slowly and limping, and you know, we finally find Charles Lee, but it takes us absolutely forever because he's just walking so slow. And I don't know what the developers were thinking. Maybe they thought at that point that, like, you know, maybe they thought, I know, we've run out of ideas, so I know how we can make it really exciting and really intense and really dramatic. Let's make Connor really injured, and then, you know, he's walking really, really slowly to get to Charles Lee, and it'll be amazing, and it'll be intense, and it'll be great. Word for you guys, it really wasn't. It just was so frustrating, drawn out, annoying. It just, at that point, I was just like, oh, God's sake, just hurry up. Just hurry up. I want to finish. And that is not the way I should feel at the end of a game at all. You know, I should want it to draw out as long as I can, but it was just done in such an annoying, frustratingly tedious way that I just really didn't enjoy it. So then, yeah, you know, Connor kills Charles Lee, and that is the end of his story. And yeah, I was really disappointed with the end of Connor's story. I felt that, you know, the final conflict should not have been with Charles Lee. It should have been with Haitham, and that the developers really lost a golden opportunity to try something new. You know, which is to have, you know, Connor fight this internal battle while he's physically fighting Haitham. Oh God, it could have been so epic. In my mind, I can picture it, and it just would have been so epic had they done that. But sadly, they didn't, and they just rushed it. It just felt really rushed in the end, and really lackluster, and that they were just like, oh right, we have to finish, we've got to finish the game, like we've got to get it out on this release date, so we have to finish it. And it just felt like they had a checklist, and it's like, kill Haitham, kill Charles Lee, and they're just like, check, check, done. And they just didn't really think clearly about how they were actually killing him, as opposed to just like, we've got to kill them, we've got to have, like, we've got to get it done. It just felt really rushed, and it really was a shame, because it was a really good game up until that point. So those are my thoughts on the end of Connor's story. Okay, so what are my thoughts on the ending of Desmond's story? Well, as you guys know, I've never really been a huge fan of Desmond. I always find him kind of a dull character, and I've never really been too interested in you know, his side of the story and how it was going to end. But actually, Assassin's Creed 3 was really good in that it actually made me interested in Desmond's story and how it was going to finish. You know, during the game, you collect all the artifacts, and yeah, and you talk to Juno, and Juno gives you more information, and she tells you more about, you know, the ancients and the, you know, the technology, the weapons, and how they originally tried to save the Earth but ultimately failed. And so, you know, I started to get really, really interested in Desmond's side of the story. And I have to admit, at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, once we'd collected all the artifacts and the key, I was excited to open up that gate and to find out what was going to happen. And you know, I was expecting something really, really epic and really huge. You know, this Desmond story had covered 4 games. You know, it had been built up all the way through. We'd seen the, you know, the development of Desmond's character through the 4 games, and it felt like, you know, even when Desmond was running, I was like, oh, it's going to be awesome. You know, Desmond's going to put the key in. He's going to put his hand on the globe, and he's going to save the world from, you know, the solar flare, and it's going to be this amazing, epic, heroic moment where like all these 4 games are going to culminate into this like, yes, we did it kind of moment. And that was what I was expecting. And then something happened which I completely did not see coming. Basically, you know, Desmond's there, his hand is on the globe, and then Juno turns up. And then Juno's like, you know, you've got to put your hand on the globe, you've got to do it, we've got to, quick, we're running out of time, put your hand on the globe, let's save the world, you know, quick, hurry. And she's really rushing Desmond along. And it was really interesting at this point because I'd already started to suspect Juno a little bit because of some of the comments the characters had made, and I was like, can we trust Juno? And then Minerva turned up, and Minerva's like, don't do it, Desmond, do not trust Juno. You know, Juno wants you to put your hand on the globe. If you do that, you're going to release Juno. And actually, she's this crazy, like, power-hungry psychopath that's basically going to take over the world and, you know, brainwash everybody, and you're all going to become slaves and have no free will, and it's going to be terrible. And yeah, and I was not expecting it. And actually, at that point, I found that really, really interesting. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. You know, Desmond's going to have to make a choice, you know, and he had 2 very difficult choices. You know, does he side with Minerva? And if he sides with Minerva, then that means that the solar flare is going to hit, but that, you know, Desmond and a small handful of, you know, people will survive, and that Desmond will become this kind of like messiah, and he will lead, you know, he will lead this new world of peace and you know, he will teach and the assassin ideals of you know, freedom and independent will. And then ultimately, you know, Desmond will die, and then his words and his message will be distorted through time and will ultimately be used for evil. You know, pretty much the cycle repeating itself. Does he do that, or does he side with Juno? And if he sides with Juno, he saves the entire human race, but at a huge cost, which is free will. And that Juno is released, and she basically brainwashes everybody and uses complete mind control on everybody, and nobody has any free will, and it's basically, you know, freedom through control effectively. And so yeah, it was a really interesting choice that Desmond had. And at this point I started to get excited, and I don't know whether it's because I've been playing too much Mass Effect 3, maybe, but at this point I was expecting a wheel to pop up and that you would have 2 choices, which is like side with Minerva here or side with Juno here. And you know, I was at that point, I was like, oh my God, are the developers going to do something which they have never done before, which is give you the player the choice, so you get to end Desmond's story how you would do it. And I was like, oh my God, like, I know Assassin's Creed 3 is not an RPG, and it never has been, but oh my God, it would have been so awesome had they given you that choice. But sadly they didn't. And basically Desmond made his decision, and his decision was to side with Juno, which to me made absolutely no sense, because what Juno was saying, which is like control through force, you know, no free will, complete control, any, you know, lack of freedom, independent thought, no conflict. Like, it just seemed that what Juno was saying was really something that the Templars were pushing. You know, these are Templar ideals, and you know, if Desmond is an assassin, I just felt like as an assassin he should have chosen Minerva's choice, even though it would have led to millions of people dying and it would have been tragic. it did fit more with what the assassins believed. So yeah, the decision that Desmond made just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I was expecting him to side with Minerva, and even I was saying, like, side with Minerva. And then when he sided with Juno, I was completely shocked, and it just felt like really inconsistent, and it felt like the Templars were winning. And then, you know, after he chooses that, then Desmond puts his hand on the globe. His brain gets completely fried, gets melted into this mush, and he collapses on the ground, boom, and he's dead. And then, you know, Juno is standing over his body, and she's like, "You played your part well, Desmond. Now it's my turn." And then just walks off. And cut to black. And, you know, I was like, oh my God, Desmond completely got screwed over. And I understand why they ended it in such a cliffhanger, because, you know, of course they couldn't give you a choice, because the game developers do need a kind of a canon ending. And you know, they did want to leave it on a cliffhanger because they do want people to buy the next game, obviously. They want people to, you know, want to know what's going to happen. And honestly, you know, personally myself, I will buy the next game because I am interested. I do want to know what's going to happen. And I also want to know what happened to Sean and Rebecca and Desmond's father, because they obviously left and ran away, and we know very little at the end of what happened to them. So I probably will buy and play the next game just to find out, you know, what's going to happen and what will happen after Desmond died. The issue I have with Desmond's ending is not that Desmond died. Actually, it makes a lot of sense that Desmond died, because, you know, if you look at his character development, you know, all the way through the 4 games, you know, in Assassin's Creed 1, he'd run away from his village or his town or his assassin's training camp, whatever it is. He'd run away from that, and, you know, he'd rejected his destiny as an assassin. And then as you play through the games, you know, Desmond starts to change and starts to grow. And finally, in Assassin's Creed 3, you know, you can, even though he fights it a little bit, you can tell that, you know, he is starting to accept that he has this huge responsibility and this huge destiny and pressure that he has to follow through. You know, at the end, ultimately, you know, he would sacrifice his life, fully accept his destiny, and sacrifice his life to save the world, and would fulfill his fate and would be at peace. That makes complete sense to me and is completely consistent with all 4 games. So the issue I have is not the fact that Desmond died. That's fine. The issue I have, again, is how it was implemented and how Desmond died. That's the problem I have, because I felt that Desmond's death, again, was rushed. It was rushed, and it was such a golden opportunity that just it wasn't used, and that it was just like a secondary thought. It was like touch it, dead, and it was just too quick. And I felt like Desmond's death, like it needed to be a lot more dramatic. It needed to be more drawn out, more epic, and it just wasn't that. It just felt really like lackluster and just really flat and disappointing. If I worked for Ubisoft, like if I was a video game developer, now I'm not, but oh my God, that would be amazing if I could do that. But let's say if I worked for Ubisoft, what would I do? How would I have written that? Okay, if I was writing that, the way in which I would have done it is I would have had, you know, Desmond obviously side with, well, Minerva probably, but side with Juno, put his hand on the globe. And then the way in which I would have directed it or written it would have been like, you know, the camera pans to Desmond's face, and, you know, everything slows down, and you see Desmond's reaction, and you can see he is in intense pain. He's in so much pain. And then, you know, as you're going through, and behind Desmond there's this dramatic music, you know, really dramatic music playing. And then you have flashbacks, you have cutscenes, and it flashes back to Desmond's history, you know, and it starts out from when he was a little boy maybe, and then as he's getting older, and then we have like flashbacks through all the 4 games, and we even have flashbacks to Desmond's ancestors. So we see, you know, Altair, and then Ezio, and then Connor, and, you know, we see these continual like flashbacks to to his character and how his story has progressed. And then, you know, it finishes at the end by panning to Desmond's face, and you just see this look of peace and contentment on his face, that like finally he's fulfilled his destiny, he's saved the world, he doesn't have to worry anymore, and he's just at peace. And that's it. And that is how I would have written Desmond's ending, like if I was going to do it. But sadly it didn't happen that way, and it was just very, very, very rushed. And I just really felt that like Desmond really was not given his dues, especially because he was supposed to be the main character. Honestly, like in the 4 games, it was all about Desmond's story, and I just felt his ending was really rushed. Again, like the developers ran out of time and they had to finish it. So those are my thoughts on Desmond's ending as well. So my overall thoughts on Assassin's Creed 3, the ending. Yeah, I was really, really disappointed. I felt that both endings, Connor's and Desmond's, were rushed. I felt like the developers really didn't think through, like in detail, like how they were ending their stories. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the writing and in the character. The character development, and it was just, both endings were just really, really anticlimactic, and it really was a shame. So yeah, I mean, this year has been a really bad year for endings. What is with this year? Like 2012 has been such a bad year for endings. You know, first we had Mass Effect 3's ending, and now we had Assassin's Creed 3. What is it with big blockbuster games, like both Mass Effect 3 and Assassin's Creed 3 are huge games that have spanned, 3 or 4 games, and the developers promised us these big epic like endings to these stories, and they just haven't delivered. And I don't know what it is. I mean, I think the problem is that many video game developers now, they're so rushed and pushed by companies like EA to release games by a certain date, that a lot of them are losing their creative edge, because they're under so much pressure to finish a game that they're just like, oh my god, we have to finish it, we've got to get it out on this day, like whatever condition it is in, whatever the ending is, let's just get it out, let's just get it done. And that they're just rushing through the endings, yeah, both games, the end just felt completely undeveloped. I mean, I honestly think that, like, many writers, when they write novels, they write the ending first. I mean, I think J.K. Rowling, who wrote, like, the Harry Potter series, she wrote the ending of the actual story before she wrote any of the books. I think video game developers should do that. They should write the ending, like, early on, so that the story is written in and that it is developed and it's well thought out, so that they're not rushing it right at the end. Is it really that hard to write such a good, well-developed ending to a story? I mean, personally, I don't think so, but that's my opinion anyway. So yeah, I still enjoyed the Assassin's Creed 3 game. I still think it's a good game, and yeah, it's enjoyable, but the main thing that lets down Assassin's Creed 3 is the ending. If the ending had been much better, I would have given it a much higher score than the 7 out of 10 that I actually gave it. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on the ending of Assassin's Creed 3. So please feel free to comment below, any comments. So if you have any questions, or I didn't mention a particular area that you'd like me to talk about, please ask, or send me a request if you want me to talk about something. Or, please also share your own thoughts on what you thought about the ending of Assassin's Creed 3. Like, did you have the same issues that I had, or were there other things that really bugged you, or did you enjoy it? Did you actually like the ending? So please comment below and let me know what you think. So yeah, anyway, that's the end of this video, I guess. So this is N7 Kate signing out, and I'll catch you guys next time in my next video. Catch you guys later. Bye.